The moment Julia Grabher walked onto the practice court at the Design Center Linz, she knew something was different. The Austrian veteran, a clay court specialist who has won both of her WTA 125 titles on the surface, is used to having the home crowd behind her. She has played in Linz before. She has felt the support of Austrian flags waving, of local voices cheering her name. But this time, something had shifted. An estimated 90% of the tickets for her first-round match against Alex Eala had been purchased by Filipino fans who had traveled from Vienna, from Munich, from across Europe, just to see their hero. The stadium that should have been a fortress for the home favorite was being transformed into a sea of Philippine flags. The chants of Laban Alex were drowning out the cries of Julia, Julia. And as Grabher looked out at the stands during her practice session, her expression shifted. The clay court specialist who has built her career on grinding down opponents on the red dirt suddenly looked like she was the one playing an away match. The Eala effect had arrived in Austria, and Julia Grabher was about to experience it firsthand.
The Upper Austria Ladies Linz tournament has been running for 35 years. It has seen legends come and go. Martina Navratilova, Venus and Serena Williams, Maria Sharapova, Ana Ivanovic. A total of 19 world #1 players have competed on its courts over the decades. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared tournament organizers for what happened when Alex Eala's name appeared on the entry list. The moment tickets went on sale, the system was overwhelmed. Filipino fans who had been tracking Eala's every move since her breakthrough with the 2025 Miami Open descended upon the online ticketing platform with a fury that crashed the servers multiple times. By the time the dust settled, an estimated 90% of the tickets for Eala's first-round match against Julia Grabher had been purchased by members of the Filipino diaspora. The numbers were staggering. For context, Grabher is an Austrian home favorite, a clay court specialist who has won both of her WTA 125 titles on the surface and almost all of her 16 ITF singles titles on clay. She has played in Linz before. She has a home court advantage that most players can only dream of. The Austrian crowd has always been behind her. But this time, the home crowd was being outnumbered. Fans traveled from Vienna, where the largest Filipino community in Austria resides. They came from Germany, where over 100,000 Filipinos live and work. They came from Switzerland, from Italy, from the United Kingdom, anywhere a direct flight could carry them. They booked hotels, filled restaurants, turned an Austrian city into a celebration of Filipino pride. The tournament's 35th anniversary edition, which had been moved to indoor red clay for the first time in its history, was supposed to be a showcase for local talent. Instead, it was being overrun by a fan base that had proven time and again that they would follow Alex Eala anywhere. When players come from countries like the Philippines, the stadium feels like a Davis Cup venue, one veteran referee observed earlier in the year. People are cheering for their country, not just for one player. That was certainly true in Linz. The Filipino fans who had traveled from across Europe were not just cheering for Eala, they were cheering for the Philippines. They were waving flags, singing songs, celebrating their heritage. And Julia Grabher, the Austrian home favorite, was about to find herself playing in what felt like an away match. The Eala effect, the phenomenon of packed stadiums, crashing ticket systems, and unprecedented ticket demand, had been documented for months. At the Australian Open, Eala's first-round match on Court 6 drew queues that wrapped around Melbourne Park, forcing security to turn away hundreds of fans. Tennis journalist Jose Morgado called the decision to put her on a small court just dumb. Novak Djokovic weighed in, calling it a good problem to have, but acknowledging that tournament organizers needed to adapt. In Dubai, the pattern repeated. Ticket sales jumped 48% year-on-year, a spike directly attributable to Eala's presence. Tournament officials noted that a large portion of her fan base comes specifically to support her, and once her match ends, the stadium often empties, even for former world #3 Alina Svitolina. Now, in Linz, the phenomenon had reached new heights. The 90% ticket takeover was proof that the Eala effect was not just about attendance, it was about transformation. The fans weren't just showing up, they were taking over.
Julia Grabher has been playing professional tennis since 2011. She has competed in front of crowds all over the world, in Paris, in New York, in Melbourne, in Tokyo. She has faced top players on big stages, including Grand Slam champions and former world number ones. But when she walked onto the practice court at the Design Center Linz and saw the sea of Philippine flags already filling the stands, she knew this match would be different. The Austrian veteran, who has reached a career-high ranking of number 54 and is widely considered a clay court specialist, is used to having the home crowd behind her, but this time, home didn't feel like home. Philippine flags dotted every section of the stands. Chants of "Laban Alex" echoed through the arena during her practice session. The Austrian fans who had come to support their local hero were scattered and outnumbered. The energy in the stadium was unmistakably pro-Eala. It was as if the Design Center Linz had been transported halfway across the world to Manila. Before the match, Grabher spoke to Austrian media about facing the Filipina sensation. "Vielleicht können wir andere bewegen, den professionellen Weg im Tennis zu gehen," she said. "Maybe we can inspire others to take the professional path in tennis." She acknowledged Eala's rise and the challenge ahead, but even she couldn't have predicted the atmosphere that awaited. When asked about the ticket sales in a pre-match interview, Grabher's expression shifted. The veteran who has seen it all suddenly looked like she was the one playing an away match.
"I've never seen anything like this," she admitted. "The support for her is incredible. It's like playing in Manila, not Linz. I knew she had a big following, but this is different." Grabher's comments echoed those of other players who had faced the Eala effect before. Jessica Pegula, who lost to Eala in the 2025 Miami semifinals despite being the hometown favorite, recalled being stunned by the Filipino presence. "I'm from there. The whole crowd was against me," Pegula said. "I was like, what on earth is going on? Where did these people come from?" Coco Gauff, who faced Eala in Dubai, also acknowledged the phenomenon. After their match, she addressed the pro-Eala crowd directly. "Thank you guys for coming out here. I know you were mostly supporting Alex, but I have to say, it's great to be on a crowded court." But for Grabher, the experience was particularly jarring because she was playing on home soil. She had expected the Austrian crowd to be behind her. She had expected the familiar chants, the friendly faces, the comfort of playing in front of her own people. Instead, she found herself surrounded by thousands of fans who had traveled from across Europe to support her opponent. "It's a bit overwhelming," Grabher admitted, "but I've been in this sport long enough to know that you can't control the crowd. You can only control your game, so that's what I'll try to do." The Austrian veteran tried to put on a brave face, but those who know her recognize the shift in her demeanor. The clay court specialist, who has built her career on grinding down opponents on the red dirt, suddenly looked like she was the one who needed to adjust. The Eala effect had arrived in Austria, and Julia Grabher was about to experience it firsthand. The tennis world watched with fascination. Would the home favorite be able to overcome the overwhelming support for her opponent? Or would the Eala effect prove too powerful, even on Grabher's home turf?
The 90% ticket takeover at the Linz Open is not an isolated incident. It is the latest data point in a pattern that has been building for over a year, a pattern that is forcing the tennis establishment to confront uncomfortable truths about what makes a star in the modern era. The numbers are staggering. At the Australian Open, Eala's pre-tournament press conference drew 196,000 views, more than 6 times the views of Carlos Alcaraz and nearly 20 times the views of world number 1 Aryna Sabalenka. Her first-round match on Court 6 drew queues that wrapped around Melbourne Park, forcing security to turn away hundreds of fans. In Dubai, ticket sales jumped 48% year-on-year, a spike directly attributable to Eala's presence. Tournament officials noted that the Filipino fans who came to support her were not just spectators, they were a force that could empty a stadium the moment her match ended. The Eala effect has been analyzed by former pros on the Nothing Major podcast, where Sam Querrey posed what would have sounded unthinkable a year ago. Is Eala the biggest draw in women's tennis right now? Steve Johnson's answer was blunt. Yes,
Bigger, he said, than Coco Gauff. Bigger than Arina Sabalenka. John Isner confirmed the scale of the phenomenon. It's a huge market. I think a lot of people underestimated how big that market is. They finally have a star on the women's side of the game. The numbers from Linz, 90% of tickets purchased by Filipino fans, are the latest proof. But what makes this statistic even more remarkable is that it happened in Austria, a country not typically associated with the Filipino diaspora. The fans didn't just come from Vienna, they came from across Europe, from Switzerland, from Italy, from the United Kingdom. They crossed borders, booked flights, rearranged their lives, all for the chance to watch a 20-year-old ranked number 46 in the world. Grabher's pre-match comments captured the reality of the situation. She knew she was facing not just Eala, but a movement. "Maybe we can inspire others to take the professional path in tennis," she said. But on this day, the inspiration was coming from the other side of the net.
When the match finally began, the atmosphere inside the Design Center Linz was unlike anything the 35-year-old tournament had ever witnessed. The stadium, which should have been a fortress for the Austrian home favorite, had been transformed into a sea of Philippine flags. The chants of "Laban, Alex" echoed through the arena, drowning out the scattered cries of "Julia, Julia" from the few Austrian fans who had managed to secure tickets. The contrast was staggering. Eala, the 20-year-old Filipina ranked number 46 in the world, walked onto the court with the confidence of a player who had an entire nation behind her. Grabher, the 29-year-old Austrian veteran who had spent her entire career grinding on clay, looked like she was the one playing an away match. Eala's movement on clay was smoother than it had ever been. She had prepared meticulously for the clay season, returning to the Rafa Nadal Academy in Majorca, training alongside four-time French Open champion Iga Świątek. The preparation paid off. Her flat ground strokes found angles that seemed impossible on the slower surface. Grabher tried to rally. She used her heavy topspin to push Eala behind the baseline. She tried to exploit any hesitation, any sign that the Filipino was uncomfortable on the clay, but the crowd was relentless. Every time Grabher won a point, the cheers were polite but muted. Every time Eala won a point, the stadium shook. The first set was a masterclass. Eala broke Grabher's serve twice, winning 6-3. The second set was more of the same. Eala's confidence grew with every point. When the final point landed, Grabher's backhand finding the net, the stadium erupted. Final score? 6-3, 6-3. Eala had done it, her first professional victory on clay, a milestone that had eluded her for years. She raised her arms in celebration, then turned to acknowledge the crowd, the same crowd that had filled 90% of the seats, the same crowd that had traveled thousands of miles to see her. But the victory was about more than tennis. It was about the power of the Filipino diaspora. The 90% of tickets that Filipino fans had grabbed were not just tickets, they were a declaration. They were a statement that the Eala effect is here to stay. Julia Grabher walked off the court at the Design Center Linz, having lost to Alex Eala 6-3, 6-3. She had every reason to be frustrated, to complain about the crowd, to make excuses about the surface, to disappear into the locker room and lick her wounds. Instead, she acknowledged the reality of what had happened. The Austrian veteran, who has spent over a decade grinding on the professional tour, recognized that she had just witnessed something unprecedented. 90% of the tickets for her home match had been purchased by fans of her opponent. She had played in front of a crowd that felt more like Manila than Linz. The 90% ticket sales figure is not just a statistic, it is a warning to the tennis establishment. The Eala effect is real, it is powerful, and it is forcing the WTA to confront uncomfortable truths about what makes a star in the modern era. The ranking system, designed to reward consistency and results,
is failing to capture the full value of players like Eala who connect with fans on a deeper level. The tournament infrastructure, built for a different era, is struggling to accommodate the unprecedented demand for tickets, and the security protocols, designed for routine events, are being overwhelmed by the passion of the Filipino diaspora. For Grabher, the experience was a reminder that tennis is changing. The old hierarchies, where home court advantage meant something, where the crowd was supposed to support the local favorite, are being rewritten. A new force has emerged, and it is not bound by geography or tradition.
The Eala effect is not going away. The Filipino diaspora is not going to stop supporting their hero, and the tennis world will have to adapt or be left behind. As Eala prepares for the rest of the clay season, Stuttgart, Madrid, Rome, Roland Garros, she carries with her something that no ranking can measure: the knowledge that her fans will travel across continents, buy 90% of the tickets, and turn any stadium into a home match. The Czech curse remains unbroken. Her record on clay is modest, but she has something more powerful than any statistic: the love of a nation that will follow her anywhere. Julia Grabher left the Design Center Linz surprised, not just by Eala's tennis, but by the power of the movement behind her. The Austrian veteran, who has played on clay courts around the world, had never experienced anything like it, and she may never experience anything like it again. Because the Eala effect is unique to Alex Eala. It is the product of a nation finding its voice through sport. It is the result of a diaspora scattered across the globe, finally seeing themselves reflected on the world's biggest stages. And it is the reason why the 20-year-old Filipina, ranked number 46 in the world, has become the most popular player in women's tennis. The Linz Open will continue, the clay season will roll on, but one thing is certain: wherever Alex Eala goes, the fans will follow, and they will grab 90% of the tickets. Julia Grabher walked onto the court at the Design Center Linz, expecting to have the home crowd behind her. The Austrian veteran, a clay court specialist who has won both of her WTA 125 titles on the surface, is used to the support of local fans. But this time, something was different. An estimated 90% of the tickets for her match against Alex Eala had been purchased by Filipino fans. Fans who had traveled from across Europe, who waved Philippine flags, who chanted "Laban Alex" throughout the match. The stadium that should have been a fortress for the home favorite had been transformed into a sea of red, white, and blue. Grabher lost 6-3, 6-3. After the match, she was honest about what had happened. "I've never experienced anything like that," she said. "The support for her is incredible. It's like playing in Manila, not Linz." The 90% ticket sales figure is not just a statistic, it is a warning to the tennis establishment. The Eala effect, the phenomenon of packed stadiums, crashing ticket systems, and unprecedented fan devotion, is real. It is powerful, and it is just getting started. For Eala, the victory was her first professional win on clay, a milestone that had eluded her for years. She trained for this moment at the Rafa Nadal Academy, working alongside four-time French Open champion Iga Swiatek. The preparation paid off. The movement continues. The clay season stretches before her. Stuttgart, Madrid, Rome, Roland Garros. The challenges are real. The Czech curse remains unbroken, but she has something that no ranking can measure: the love of a nation that will follow her anywhere. Julia Grabher left the Design Center Linz surprised, but she wasn't alone. The entire tennis world is watching, and the Eala effect is just getting started. What do you think about the 90% ticket sales for Eala's match? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe now for daily WTA news, match breakdowns, and stories that go beyond the scoreline. Because at Rally Radar, every day is match day.